Okay.
Perfect. Hello, and welcome back to High Vibe Table Talks. And I'm excited to have my first um, duplicate guest. You were on earlier in this season. Welcome, Emilia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. I know that, like I said, I had you on before, but and this topic is going to be a little bit different because we are going to be talking all about your book, which is officially in the world. It People can hold it and read it and touch it, which is so exciting. But first, can you remind people a little bit about who you are and who you serve?
Yeah. So my name's Emilia Stypulkowska, and I'm a career coach and founder of Sunnyside Up Coaching. And I really help people to define what they want out of their career and make sure that it lines up with what motivates them, with what lights them up, to make sure that they're creating the meaning and having the impact that they want to have in the world with the skills and talents that they have.
Mm, so awesome. So great.
Thank you.
So tell us about your book. Tell us about the concept. Tell us what you want the reader to get out of it, the name, everything.
Yeah, so the book is on female friendships, and it was written as a collaboration with me and Yvonne Rodney. And so she and I wrote this book about our own experiences and interwove it with some fictional examples. And also, we did a survey for 110 women of ages between 20 and 75. And, so they shared their perspective on different questions around female friendships as well. So we also wove those insights through the book.
Very cool. Were there things that surprised you when the questions came back, the answers to the questions came back?
I think the most memorable kind of statistic that I realized through the questionnaire was just what a high percentage of women will sort of back out of friendships that are no longer working by just kind of investing less and less energy in it over time versus, having any kind of real conversation or breakup with the friend.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what I love about this concept so much is that, I mean, just in conversations that I have with people in my universe, it's like it's so hard to make friends kind of after you're out of school. There are so
Yeah.
many friendships that are created out of proximity. You're in the same
Yes.
class, you have the same friend group, you do the same sports, and then as you're kind of out of that and really busy with your career, with your life, with things, you have to be really intentional with
Yeah.
who you're friends with and your energy, because you only have
hmm
so much energy. And so if you're putting them into relationships that aren't necessarily serving you or connected to your energy, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's so great that you brought up that word intentional because that's really I guess the overall concept of the book is trying to get more intentional about friendships. So being more intentional about the friendships already in your life and getting more intentional about friendships that you want to have in your life. And we actually do discuss the difference between an intentional friendship versus one that's kind of formed out of convenience, right? It's convenient to make friends with your colleague because you work in the same building and you can go for the lunch in the same kind of radius. Um, so, you can take a friendship of convenience out into a more intentional friendship, but you have to get intentional about it and you have to really nurture that friendship and take action and follow up on things so that you can continue to nurture it and so that
Mm-hmm.
it can continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as to your point as well about, making friends now that people are out of school, this is something that I've found because I've moved. I have kind of done a tour of Ontario in the last 10, like 15 years. So because I moved around and I constantly had to build my network from the ground up, I became really good at making friends. So we do have a chapter on making friends in the book, and I share real life examples and also my advice to kind of highlight the nuance of the approach, right? Because very often we think, oh, I already know how to do that. But then where do people actually stumble and where do things go wrong?
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that anybody can do it. It's a muscle that we
Yes.
just need to practice.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing for making friendships is that we always kind of want to like we don't want to be rejected, right? So number one, we might meet somebody at a party and, we don't ask for their contact information because they're like, well, what if they think I'm hitting on them? What if they think, I'm being weird in some way? What if my friend gets annoyed that, I'm trying to hang out with her friend without her or whatever it is. So, we're so scared of being rejected that sometimes we'll explain things away to ourselves like, oh, well, if that person wanted to hang out with me, they would have asked for my contact information, or they would have followed up when we said, we should meet up for a coffee, but they didn't follow up. So, I guess they don't really want the friendship. So we try to leave the ball in the other person's court, where I'm encouraging people to say, well, what's the worst that can happen? Like it did actually, I think it was like 11 years ago. I was living in Ottawa at the time, and I asked this girl to hang out that I had met at this event. And like I asked her for her contact information, and she was like, I don't know, she said something along the lines of, oh, my boyfriend and I are like really busy or something. And I'm like, oh, she thinks I'm hitting on her. Is that really like the worst case scenario? And that's more about her and her assumptions versus anything to do with me, right?
Mhm.
That if she thinks that somebody asks for her contact information, they're hitting on her.
Yeah. And there's so many times where like we can make up these stories in our head that are so untrue,
Yeah.
and we allow them to like stop us from taking any action. And really, if we just either ignored them or played a scenario in our brain that was more supportive, our life
Yeah.
could be totally different.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, what was your favorite and your least favorite part of writing a book?
Yeah. So my favorite quote about writing a book is that writing a book is nothing like thinking about writing a book. I think we tend to romanticize it. We imagine, a person at a coffee shop on a rainy day and they're typing away on their laptop and they're just writing down their brilliant insights. Or I think about that. Love Actually, the movie, and the writer in it, and he's like alone at this, cottage, and he's like typing on his typewriter, and all these papers they fly away. Like, so I think that we really tend to romanticize the notion of writing a book, and then when you sit down to it, you're like, at least the experience for me was, I would write down a sentence and I'd be like, black, that's terrible. Oh, that's horrible. I don't understand like how, this idea in my head sounded so good. And then when I go to write it down, it's so weird. And so I would say the hardest part is just the vulnerability and that inner critic that comes up so loudly when we cement our words on a page. And I'm a big journal writer. Like I love writing in my journal. That's something that's just part of some, but like as soon as you start to think that, oh, somebody would read this and somebody would look at this and what would they think about the way that I've talked about, like written this paragraph, your inner critic can come up really, really loudly. So I would say that was my least favorite part of it. And my favorite part of it is because I think that was the other part of your question. My favorite part about writing this book was actually the effect that it's had. And the really brilliant things that's come out of it that I hadn't anticipated, which is, conversations happening with my close female friends, like things that we hadn't talked about before, or, things that they hadn't known that I thought about or like also affected me. And so it's actually been the bridge for a lot of conversations and also the reigniting of friendship. So that's been my favorite thing about it. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. It's in entrepreneurship, I like to say it's the must be nices. Like it must be
Mhm.
so nice to own your own business and you get to make your own schedule and you get to like just do whatever you want and like not report to anybody. And it's like, okay, yes. And the other end of the stick is you don't report to anybody and all decisions are yours. And like
Yeah.
I think that same thing, we tend to romanticize it. Like, oh, it must be so nice to like read a book and sit down at a coffee shop and it must just flow for you. And it just must be,
Yeah.
excuse me, it must be so easy
Yeah.
and you must be so creative. And it's like, that's a very small piece of it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, talking about how you pulled experiences from your female friendships from your life and writing about those in the book, can you tell us about that experience? I think, when you talk about vulnerability of putting it out there, but you're also putting vulnerability of your interactions with other people out there. What was that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, so it's something that I think it was really important for me to share examples from my friendships and, reflect on friendships that I've had over the years and, and what they meant to me and what were some of the pitfalls or what were some of the rough parts. Because I think that, I didn't intend to write any kind of textbook, right, about female friendships or about, I don't know, social circles or whatever the case may be. Like, I really wanted these things to be real and grounded in actual friendships. So yeah, so it was an interesting process. Like I definitely had some fears around, how my friends would react to seeing our stories in the book. But the reaction has been really, really positive, which was a really surprising benefit. Like I knew I had to put this out there. I knew that I really wanted to help other people navigate their friendships and but yeah, it was very vulnerable because I just didn't know, like, what would my friends say about seeing themselves on these pages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us more about that part. Like you said that you knew you wanted to get it out there. What did it start as? What was like the spark and what are some
Yeah.
early beginnings of like, oh, I think that this is a project I want to take on?
Yeah. So it was a particular friendship of mine that really sparked the interest in writing this book. Because so she and I had, like, she'd been my best friend, since we were in high school. And like one of my two best friends at the time, like in high school. And she and I went through a lot around the time of her wedding. She got married 10 years ago. And that was a tough time for me because I had insecurities that I hadn't realized were there. And I had this sort of anxiety about my life. And I think that without realizing it, very often we look at our friends as benchmarks for where we should be, right? So we look to our friend and we say, they have this kind of job or this kind of relationship. And so that's where I should be in my life, right? Like, and I looked at her and her life as like a subconscious benchmark for where I should be in my life. And I wasn't there. And that created a lot of anxiety for me. And I didn't know how to express that to her. And I also think that, there's, it's hard when your friend, like, you want to be happy for your friend and you want to celebrate them. And so you don't want to bring up any conversations about, oh, well, I'm actually like really struggling with this, or I really don't know what about this, or, this is bringing up a lot of fears for me. Number one, I didn't have that like conscious self-awareness that that's what was happening for me. And number two, like I had no idea, like I wouldn't have known how to have the conversation had I even thought to have it. And then three, this pressure of, well, I should be happy for my friend. Like, this is the only time she's going to get married. So, I can't put a damper on this. Right. And so it was this really interesting experience of somebody in my life kind of going through like one of the best moments in their life, and me kind of going through like a harder time. And I think that happens a lot in female friendships and in any kind of friendship where, like, I don't know, your friend could have just bought a new house and you just lost your job, right? Like that can happen. And so how do you navigate that, um, you know, that experience of having opposite end, you, like experiences?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was really what brought me back to this all the time, because I saw that as a time that was so hard, and I was like, what would I have done differently, or how would I have navigated that? That affected our friendship, and I think that for some time, like we weren't as close as we could have been. Um, and now, thankfully, like we're closer than ever, which is wonderful. But it really nagged at me for a number of years where we still struggled to find our footing after that experience. Like, you know, it really nagged at me to say, what did I learn and how would I have done that differently? If I were in that same spot again.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really beautiful. And one of the things I love about like working with creatives like that is they're able to speak to previous versions of themselves. And it's almost like in
Mm,
this book, you're able to say, like, 10-year ago me, this is the book that I wish I would have had because I would have
yeah,
navigated this experience very differently.
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So you did say that you had a co-author, and that sounds like it brings on a whole another set of challenges and benefits. Can you tell us about what that was like?
Yeah, so I'd love to tell you kind of the origin story of the collaboration, because I think it's so unique and beautiful in itself. And I do want to, share first and foremost, if I had not had a collaborator for this book, it would not be out in the world. Um, so Yvonne has written, I think, 7 books to date aside from this one. And so she is the experienced book author, and she had known what this process would look like, and I did not. And so if it weren't for her, like this book would not exist. So yes, that being said, she and I met at a conference in January 2020. It was actually a career development practitioner conference. And I had attended her session that was about, dreams that you've had on hold for a long time. What is that dream, and how can you get unstuck on it? And so the thing that I had written down was, writing a book. And so I went up to her after her session and I said, because she had mentioned the fact that she had authored a number of books. And so I went up to her at the end of the session and I said, this is like, that's my dream. That's something that I've thought about for so long, and I haven't made it happen. And so she said, oh, well, here's my business card. Call me when you get back to Toronto, and and we should talk. Like book writers should stick together. So I took her card. I called her when when I got back to Toronto, and I explained to her the concept of the book. And she was like, I have never collaborated on a book with someone. I have never offered or wanted to collaborate with someone, but I love this concept. And if you would like, I would love to write this book with you. And so she was someone that I had just met. And then all of a sudden, we were meeting up at her house. Um, you know, and we started working on this book together, and it was such an incredible journey and a friendship that formed through that. But it's just so amazing what happens when you follow your intuition, both from her side and from my side, right? Like my intuition told me to mention to her that I want to write a book, not ever in my wildest dreams thinking that she would, say, oh, well, we should write this book together. And then for her, she was like, I must be crazy, but I'm going to offer to, collaborate on this book with somebody that I've met exactly once for like 5 minutes. So yeah, and she's really the person that got us to where we are today, because she's the one that was like, okay, like, let's get on it. Where are the edits? So when are we meeting? Because it was just a process that I didn't imagine it would be so difficult.
Hmm. So having that accountability
Yes.
and someone from experience and someone to just pull you along
Yeah.
was really, like you said, this book wouldn't be in the world if it weren't for that. So that's really, really great. And
Yeah.
I love that story of like, you just said, hey, here's my dream.
Yeah.
And the universe kind of came together for all that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It was so, so, so cool.
Yeah, very cool. So you were extremely busy while going down this path because the book writing process is a lot. And you also got engaged, planned a wedding, had a wedding, were building your business, building your team, and tell us how you managed all of those plates in that schedule.
Yeah. Um, it was it was definitely difficult. I think the most, like, I think I realized at one point, I think it was near the end of last year, where I said, okay, I've continued to add to my plate and I haven't removed anything, but I don't magically have more time than I did. And so I think part of that process was letting go actually of some subcontract work that I was doing. Um, to make a little bit more space. But really, it was just kind of continuing to come back to, okay, what are the things that I have on the go? How can I move the needle? And yeah, like your group was so great for that, because that's one of the things that I decided to focus on. We can talk about the things that need to get done for the week, but what if I just focus on those things that I know if I don't intentionally move the needle, I won't, because everything else will get done. It's more reactive.
Hmm.
And so making that distinction between like reactive will happen come hell high water because like I've made the commitment, and then what are the things that are more proactive and I have to be on them myself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, like it would be silly to put on your list, oh, I need to make sure I brush my teeth every day because like that's just so naturally built into the part of our process that you don't even have to think about it. But
Yeah.
sitting down and taking time to edit your book is something that can easily get pushed to the side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, in kind of layering the idea of bringing intentionality to it and back to like your earlier when we talked about like being super intentional with your friendships, let's say someone does like a friend inventory at the moment and they're not spending as much time with the people that they want, or the people that are in their lives just aren't energetically where they want to be spending their time.
Mhm.
What are some either questions they should ask in that inventory or steps if they're like, oh, I really need to weed my garden of some of my current friendships to create space for other friendships?
Yeah. I think the most important question is, how does this person make me feel? When I finish like a phone call or a hangout with them, how do I feel at the end of that? Do I feel more energized, more excited about life, more excited about everything, or do I feel drained? And so it's kind of interesting too, because I started writing this book in 2020, which began this evolution of me really focusing more on myself and my personal goals, where I think that for the majority of my life, I was focused on other people and I was focused on, my relationships, my friendships, and, how I could support others and how I could give to others. And so it's interesting that these 3 years that I was writing this friendship book, I was actually more focused on my own personal goals, which of course, if I hadn't been, then I couldn't write a book because I wasn't doing that for anybody else. Right. Well, minus working, with a collaborator and then knowing, okay, I'm being held accountable. So yeah, that really did help. That really did help. It's like that, relationship orientation will never fully go away. But yeah, yes, I sort of lost my train of thought for a moment there, but
So asking people, the most important thing is asking
Yeah.
themselves how they feel around others.
Yes, how they feel around others. And so it's interesting how in these 3 years, I've been a lot more intentional about, who I'm spending time with and who I'm investing energy with. And I found that a lot of times, like I would reach out to a friend because I felt guilty, because I felt like, oh, if I don't reach out, this person will be kind of like low key mad at me. And I just decided not to feed into that anymore. I decided not to feed into it anymore where I'm, building a friendship out of guilt. Like it should be because, I want to spend time with this person and I feel great with this person. So I would say that's probably the biggest thing to ask yourself. But I do actually have a list of questions in the book. And it does sort of depend on each person individually, because like you might have different values, right? And you might invest in your friendships for different reasons. But those are some good questions to kind of see like which of these resonate with me.
Mm-hmm. And another question to add on to that, as far as like when you do have to weed your garden, how do you not use the idea that like, oh, because I'm letting them go,
Mm-hmm.
that's me saying I'm better than them.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is a fear that plagues people when they're like, oh, I have to rid this friendship because I'm better now. And that's not necessarily the case, but it's a fear that they think that in doing so, that's what their intention is.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because in a way that's kind of the guilt aspect, right? Where it's like I feel guilty if I'm telling myself that I don't want to spend time with this person because maybe this person will think that I think that I'm better than them, or, like, yeah, in some way different, or, more important, or whatever it is, right? And so, in terms of letting go of that guilt, it's a work in progress. And I would say the best advice that I have on that is not to feel like you can release that guilt all at once. But, when you have that urge of reaching out to a friend that, drains your energy, or maybe, has a very different goals and like lifestyle, and you want to put more energy into like what you're trying to create in your life, what I would say is kind of let go of that guilt one bit at a time, right? So just stop answering that urge to reach out to that person. And so it's not something you'll let go, all at once, but it's something that like you can stop kind of feeding into that urge to reach out to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a shedding process, and
Yeah.
it's um small bites at a time. You don't have to just
Yeah.
like completely cut that person off altogether and but
Yeah.
just slowly ease into
Yeah.
that mindset and intentionality.
Yes. And the other thing that I'd love to add to that is even for the friendships that I do want to cultivate, I still want to continue to leave enough space for everything that I'm doing in my life. And, whether it's my business, whether it's like my relationship, like my romantic relationship, whether it's like time with my family, or in nature, or on fitness. So the other thing that I would say is, like I used to feel really, really guilty around not being able to make space for someone within like the week. So I think that's another thing like to remember, is just to really focus on like, when do I need that recharge time? And don't feel guilty about saying that you're busy when you're really busy, relaxing or like recharging from your week or whatever it is. And so that's so important too, to continue to carve out that space and like make plans further in advance if needed, to make sure that you're not nurturing your relationships at the cost of your own like health and energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Your relationship with self is a crucial part of that intentionality as well.
Yeah.
Really, really great. I can't believe how fast that time went. It's so crazy.
Mhm.
This was really, really fun. And so where can people find you, find your book? We'll leave all the links in the show notes, but tell us more about where people can connect with you.
Yeah. So I have my own website, sunnysideupcoaching.ca. And so people can book a call, or they can or they can send me a note through there, and also LinkedIn. And also I'm on Instagram at sunnyside_up_coaching. And in terms of the book, it can be found on Amazon now, which is really fantastic. So if you want to find it, it makes a great holiday gift. So go for it. And yeah, I think those are all the best ways to reach me.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Amelia. I'm so happy for you, proud of you. This is so incredible. And as I've said before, like the ripple effects that this book has already had and is going to continue to have as it is out into the world is just really, really incredible. So thank you for putting your time, energy, vulnerability into all your resources into something so amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about it and to share it with the world.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.